What if I told you that the hottest, driest, most sun-scorched border in your garden is not a problem to solve, but an opportunity waiting for the right plants? Plants that do not just survive intense heat, but genuinely thrive in it, producing some of the most spectacular displays of color, texture, and drama available from any garden setting. Most gardening advice tells you to amend your soil, install irrigation, and fight against the conditions you have. Today I'm showing you 10 perennials that were built for those exact conditions and that reward heat, sun, and even a little neglect with performances that make your toughest border the best show in your entire garden. Let us get into it. Plant 1. Crocosmia Lucifer. The scarlet flame that lights up summer. Let us start with the plant that stops people mid-stride when they walk past a hot border in full July flame. Crocosmia Lucifer is not a subtle plant. It is a statement. Those arching stems lined with intensely scarlet tubular flowers rise 3 to 4 feet above sword-like foliage in a display so vivid, so structurally dramatic, that a single established clump becomes the focal point of any border it occupies. And it achieves this while tolerating full sun, reflected heat from paving and walls, and drought stress that would wilt more sensitive perennials into complete failure. The South African origin of Crocosmia tells you everything you need to know about its heat tolerance. This is a plant evolved for intense sun, seasonal drought, and the kind of baking conditions that characterize the summer borders where most perennials struggle. Once established, Crocosmia spreads gradually through underground corms, forming increasingly impressive clumps that produce more flower stems every year without any division or maintenance required from you. Hummingbirds visit the tubular flowers obsessively, making a Crocosmia planting one of the most reliable wildlife attractors in a hot garden. The flowers are followed by seed heads that provide winter interest and self-sow modestly without becoming invasive in well-drained soils. Plant corms in spring, spacing them 6 inches apart and 4 inches deep. Water through the first growing season to establish the root system, then step back and let the plant demonstrate exactly why experienced hot climate gardeners consider it indispensable. The fiery red of Crocosmia Lucifer against the blue summer sky is one of the most purely exhilarating color combinations available in any garden. Plant 2. Dahlia. The summer spectacle that delivers all season. Dahlias have a reputation for being fussy, demanding plants that require staking, deadheading, lifting, and winter storage. That reputation is not entirely unfair for the largest dinner plate varieties. But the compact and medium-sized Dahlia cultivars grown in a hot sunny border ask far less and give back one of the longest, most continuously spectacular flowering displays of any perennial in this list. From midsummer through the first hard frost, dahlias in full sun produce an ever-expanding display of blooms in virtually every color except blue, creating a constantly evolving show that changes every time you look at it. The heat tolerance of dahlias surprises people who associate them with the cool maritime climates of the Pacific Northwest, where they are famously grown commercially. But dahlias are native to the mountains of Mexico and Central America, where summer days are hot, intense, and sun-drenched. They were built for heat and altitude, which means they perform beautifully in full sun borders as long as their moisture requirements are met during establishment and bloom periods. Plant tubers after the last frost, spacing them 2 to 3 feet apart depending on variety size. Stake taller varieties at planting time to avoid damaging the tubers with stakes inserted later. Water consistently through the growing season, particularly during bloom when water stress reduces flower production and causes buds to abort. Deadhead spent blooms regularly to encourage continuous flower production, rather than allowing the plant to shift energy into seed development. The color range available in dahlias is genuinely extraordinary. Deep burgundy approaching black, pure white, soft pastels, bicolors, picotees with contrasting petal edges, and vivid saturated jewel tones all exist within the genus. Choose a color palette that complements the other plants in your hot border, and dahlias will provide that color from July through October without pause. In cold winter climates, lift the tubers after the first frost, dry them briefly, and store in barely moist peat or vermiculite in a cool, dark space until spring replanting time. Plant 3. Achillea, Yarrow. The drought-proof workhorse. Achillea, Yarrow, is the perennial that experienced hot border gardeners plant and then forget about because it asks absolutely nothing after establishment, and gives back months of flat-topped flower clusters in colors ranging from soft yellows and apricots through deep reds and burgundies, all held on strong stems above finely divided ferny foliage that remains attractive even when the plant is not in bloom. It tolerates heat, drought, poor soil, and neglect with a cheerful indifference that makes it genuinely one of the most low-maintenance perennials available for any sunny position. The native habitat of many Achillea species is the dry meadows and rocky slopes of southern Europe and western Asia, where summer rainfall is minimal and temperatures are high. These are not conditions the plant tolerates reluctantly. They are the conditions it prefers. Overwatering and overly fertile soil produce weak, floppy growth that requires staking. Lean, dry conditions produce compact, self-supporting plants that need no intervention whatsoever. The flat-topped flower clusters, botanically called corymbs, provide a horizontal architectural element that contrasts beautifully with the vertical spikes of other hot border perennials like Kniphofia and the rounded forms of sedums and echinaceas. This structural diversity is part of what makes a well-designed hot border visually interesting, rather than simply a collection of upright flower spikes. Yarrow provides that essential horizontal plane. Butterflies and beneficial insects visit yarrow flowers in extraordinary numbers, making any yarrow planting a hub of pollinator activity through the summer months. The flowers also dry beautifully, holding their color well, and can be cut for fresh or dried arrangements. Plant container-grown plants in spring or autumn, spacing them 18 inches apart for varieties that reach 2 feet in height. Water through the first growing season, then largely ignore them. Divide every 4 to 5 years if clumps become congested, replanting divisions, and sharing or composting the excess. Yarrow asks almost nothing and delivers continuously for years. Plant 4, Kniphofia, red-hot poker. The vertical drama that hummingbirds love, Kniphofia, red-hot poker, brings a quality to hot borders that few other perennials provide. Absolute vertical drama. Those tall poker-straight stems topped with dense cylindrical spikes of tubular flowers in fiery reds, oranges, and yellows create an architectural presence that reads clearly from a distance and provides a focal point that anchors the entire planting. And like Crocosmia, every single bloom is visited obsessively by hummingbirds who recognize the tubular flower form as a reliable nectar source from considerable distances. The South African origin of Kniphofia, shared with Crocosmia, gives it the same heat and drought tolerance that makes it genuinely suited to the hottest, sunniest positions in any garden. The grass-like evergreen foliage remains attractive year-round in mild climates and provides winter structure that most herbaceous perennials cannot offer after they die back to ground level in autumn. In cold winter climates, the foliage benefits from being tied up in a loose bundle before winter to protect the crown from excessive moisture that can cause rot in freezing conditions. Plants Kniphofia in spring from container-grown stalk, spacing plants 2 to 3 feet apart to allow for their substantial mature clump size. They resent disturbance once established and perform best when left in place for many years without division. The flower color range has expanded dramatically beyond the traditional red and orange shades to include soft yellows, creams, corals, and bicolor varieties that open one color and fade to another as the flowers age from bottom to top of the spike. Pair Kniphofia with the horizontal flower heads of Achillea for a structural contrast that makes both plants look more intentional and more impressive than either would alone. The combination of vertical and horizontal forms is one of the fundamental principles of successful border design, and these two heat-tolerant perennials provide that contrast while asking almost nothing in terms of maintenance or inputs. Plant 5, Monarda, Bergamot, the fragrant pollinator magnet. Monarda, bee balm or bergamot, brings something to a hot border that most other plants on this list do not prioritize: fragrance. The leaves and flowers are intensely aromatic when brushed or crushed, releasing the distinctive bergamot scent that gives the plant its common name, and that makes walking past a Monarda planting a multisensory experience rather than a purely visual one. The distinctive shaggy, tubular flowers arranged in whorled clusters at the stem tops are magnets for bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds, creating a planting that is alive with pollinator activity from midsummer through early autumn. Monarda is native to North America rather than the Mediterranean or South African origins of many heat-tolerant perennials, and its native range spans from hot, humid summers in the eastern United States to the dry heat of the Great Plains. This geographic breadth means Monarda adapts to a wider range of hot climate moisture conditions than most perennials, performing in both humid heat and dry heat as long as it receives consistent moisture during its peak growing and flowering period. The primary limitation of Monarda is its susceptibility to powdery mildew in conditions of poor air circulation and humid heat. Choosing mildew-resistant varieties, including those from the Sugarbuzz and Pardon My series, dramatically reduces this problem. Spacing plants generously to ensure good airflow through the planting also helps, as does avoiding overhead watering that leaves foliage wet into evening hours when mildew spores germinate most readily. The color range includes vivid reds, soft pinks, purples, and whites. The native species Monarda fistulosa, with its lavender pink flowers, is particularly drought-tolerant and mildew-resistant, making it an excellent choice for hot, dry borders where irrigation is minimal. Plants in spring from container-grown stock or divisions, spacing 18 to 24 inches apart. The clumps expand steadily and benefit from division every 3 to 4 years to maintain vigor and prevent the center of the clump from dying out. Plant 6. Sedum. The succulent powerhouse that never quits. Sedum, particularly upright autumn flowering types, formerly classified as Sedum spectabile, and now reclassified botanically as Hylotelophyum, is the perennial that defines reliability in a hot, sunny border. The thick, succulent blue-green leaves store water efficiently, allowing the plant to manage extended drought without visible stress. The flat-topped flower clusters that emerge in late summer and persist through autumn provide one of the longest flowering displays of any perennial, changing color as they age, from soft pink or white through deeper rose and eventually to russet seed heads that provide winter interest standing through snow and frost. Pollinators treat sedum as essential late-season habitat when many other nectar sources have finished for the year. Butterflies, bees, and beneficial insects cover flowering sedum in such numbers that a single established clump becomes a visible pollinator aggregation point in any garden. This late-season value is particularly significant because it bridges the gap into autumn when declining pollinator resources make every remaining food source disproportionately important. Sedum tolerates the worst soil conditions of almost any commonly grown perennial. Thin, rocky, poor fertility, compacted, and drought-stressed soils all support healthy sedum growth. The only condition it genuinely dislikes is wet, heavy soil that remains saturated, which causes crown rot. Good drainage is essential. Everything else is negotiable. The structural quality of sedum through the growing season is consistently attractive. The rounded form of the developing flower buds, the flat-topped flower heads at their peak, and the architectural seed heads that persist through winter all provide visual interest across 9 months of the year. Many gardeners leave the old stems standing until spring specifically for this winter presence. Cut back to ground level in early spring just before new growth emerges. Divide clumps every 5 to 6 years if they become floppy in the center. The well-grown sedum in lean soil often maintains its compact form indefinitely without division. Plant 7. Echinacea. Coneflower. The prairie native that powers through heat. Echinacea, coneflower, is the North American prairie native that brings the toughness of grassland evolution to the garden border. The tall, sturdy stems, topped with distinctive raised cone centers surrounded by reflexed petals, create a bold architectural flower form that reads clearly in the landscape and provides months of continuous bloom from midsummer through autumn. The native range of Echinacea spans the hottest, driest prairies of the central United States, where summer temperatures exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit regularly, and rainfall is sporadic at best. Heat is not a stress condition for Echinacea. It is home. The color range available in modern Echinacea cultivars has expanded dramatically beyond the traditional purple-pink of the species Echinacea purpura to include whites, oranges, yellows, reds, and buckcolor combinations that make Echinacea one of the most versatile color choices in a hot border. Some of these complex hybrid colors sacrifice a degree of the bulletproof toughness that the straight species possesses, so choosing varieties specifically recommended for heat tolerance ensures the performance you expect from a prairie-evolved plant. Goldfinches consume Echinacea seeds enthusiastically in autumn and winter, perching on the dried seed heads and extracting seeds in a display that provides valuable late-season wildlife activity and movement in the garden. Leaving the seed heads standing through winter rather than cutting them back in autumn provides this wildlife value alongside the winter structural interest of the dark cones rising above snow or frost. Plant from container-grown stock in spring, spacing plants 18 to 24 inches apart depending on variety size. Water through the first growing season to establish deep roots, then reduce watering significantly. Established Echinacea tolerates extended drought and performs better in lean conditions than in overly rich soil that produces weak, disease-prone growth. Deadhead regularly during the bloom season to encourage continuous flower production, then leave the late-season flowers to develop into seed heads for winter interest and wildlife value. Plant 8. Hollyhocks. The cottage garden classic that loves the heat, hollyhocks, Alchata bring height, nostalgia, and unabashed cottage garden charm to a hot, sunny border in a way that few other perennials can match. Those tall spikes lined with large, ruffled flowers in shades of pink, red, white, yellow, and near black rise 5 to 8 feet above basal rosettes of rounded leaves, creating a dramatic vertical presence that anchors the back of any border and provides the height that makes a planting feel established and complete. The Mediterranean origin of hollyhocks means they were built for hot, dry summers and poor soils. They resent wet winters more than they resent hot summers, making them particularly suited to climates with seasonal rainfall patterns that concentrate moisture in cooler months and leave summers relatively dry. In these climates, hollyhocks are genuinely perennial and reliably return year after year. In wet summer climates, they often behave as short-lived perennials or biennials, completing their life cycle in 2 years rather than persisting indefinitely. Rust, a fungal disease that produces orange pustules on the undersides of leaves, is the primary pest problem with hollyhocks. It is largely cosmetic rather than life-threatening, but it is unsightly. Removing affected leaves promptly, avoiding overhead watering, and ensuring good air circulation all help manage rust. Newer, rust-resistant varieties reduce the problem significantly and are worth seeking out specifically if rust has been problematic in your garden previously. The old-fashioned single-flowered forms are generally tougher and more reliably perennial than the showy double-flowered types, though the doubles are undeniably spectacular when they perform well. Choose based on whether you prioritize long-term reliability or maximum visual drama. Both have their place in a thoughtfully designed hot border. Plant from seeds sown directly where you want them to grow, or transplant seedlings very young as hollyhocks develop deep taproots that resent disturbance once established. Space plants 2 feet apart and stake if your site is exposed to strong winds. Plant 9. Helenium. The late summer gold that fills the gap. Helenium, sneezeweed, is the North American native perennial that lights up late summer and autumn with masses of daisy-like flowers in warm shades of gold, orange, red, and bronze that fill the visual gap between the peak summer flush of earlier perennials and the final autumn display of asters and sedums. The raised central cone of each flower, ranging from yellow to brown depending on variety, provides the distinctive profile that makes Helenium immediately recognizable even before you register the color of the petals. The native range of Helenium species spans wet meadows and prairie margins across much of North America, which initially suggests this is not a drought-tolerant plant. But established Helenium in garden conditions adapts remarkably well to summer heat and periodic drought, particularly when planted in moisture-retentive soil that buffers the plant through dry spells without requiring constant irrigation. It is not as genuinely drought-proof as Sedum or Echinacea, but it is far tougher than its native wet meadow habitat would suggest. The color warmth that Helenium brings to late-season plantings is its greatest design contribution. Where so many autumn bloomers lean toward cool pinks, purples, and blues, Helenium delivers the warm golds, russets, and bronzes that complement autumn light and the beginning of seasonal color change in deciduous trees and shrubs. Pairing Helenium with late-flowering sedums and grasses creates an autumn border combination that feels seasonally appropriate in a way that purely summer color schemes never achieve in the cooler light and longer shadows of September and October. Plant from container-grown stock in spring, spacing plants 18 to 24 inches apart. Pinch the growing tips in late spring to encourage bushier growth and more flower production on slightly shorter stems that need less staking support. Water consistently through establishment and flowering periods. Divide clumps every 3 to 4 years to maintain vigor. Helenium is not the absolute lowest maintenance plant on this list, but the late-season color contribution it makes justifies the modest additional attention it requires. Plant 10. Artichoke. The architectural statement that also feeds you. And we close with the plant that most people never consider as an ornamental perennial, but that experienced hot border designers consistently use for the extraordinary architectural presence it provides alongside its practical food production value. Globe artichoke, Cinara cardunculus scolimus, produces massive silver-gray, deeply divided leaves that can reach 3 feet in length on plants that form substantial clumps 5 feet across. The sheer scale and the dramatic foliage texture make a single artichoke plant a focal point that draws the eye from across the garden and provides a structural weight that few other perennials can match. The edible flower buds that develop on tall stems rising from the center of the plant in summer are the familiar artichokes of culinary use. But if you allow some buds to mature and open rather than harvesting all of them for eating, the flowers that emerge are extraordinary, thistle-like structures in vivid purple-blue that are genuinely among the most spectacular individual flowers any perennial produces. They are also magnets for bees, who work the flowers so intensely that a flowering artichoke becomes an audible as well as visual feature of the garden. Artichoke is fully perennial in zones 7 through 11 and can be grown as an annual or lifted and stored in colder climates where winter temperatures kill the crown. In its perennial range, it establishes as a permanent architectural anchor that returns more substantially every year, eventually forming clumps that dominate their area of the border. The heat and drought tolerance is considerable. Once established, artichoke manages summer heat with no supplemental irrigation in many climates. Plant from divisions or container-grown plants in spring, spacing them 4 to 5 feet apart to accommodate their substantial mature size. Water consistently through establishment. Harvest buds when they are tight and plump for eating, or leave them to mature into their extraordinary purple flowers for ornamental value. Cut flower stems back to the base after flowering finishes. In cold winter climates, mound mulch over the crown before hard freezes arrive to provide winter protection. The combination of dramatic foliage, spectacular flowers, and edible harvest from a single heat-tolerant plant makes artichoke genuinely one of the most multifunctional perennials available for any hot, sunny border. If this list just transformed your thinking about that hot, dry, sun-scorched border from a problem space into an opportunity for some of the most spectacular perennials you can grow, smash that like button right now and help this reach every gardener who has been fighting their conditions instead of working with them. Drop a comment and tell me which plant you are adding to your hot border this season. Are you going for the drama of Crocosmia and Kniphofia, the reliable workhorses of Yarrow and Sedum, or the architectural statement of globe artichoke? I read every single comment, and I want to know what your hot border is about to become. Subscribe and ring the notification bell because every week we show you how to turn every difficult growing condition into something genuinely spectacular. See you in the next one.